Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Moms Like Me, powered by Support Now. I am so excited to be able to have another wonderful conversation with an incredible mom, entrepreneur, wife, community builder, Rachel Vermeulen. So, Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jordan. I'm so happy to be with you today and chatting.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, for some background here, we met Rachel through good old Instagram, and we love making wonderful connections through Instagram, particularly those that have stories and families that inspire us. And Rachel, your family certainly falls into that category. And for those that might not know, Rachel is the mom of two beautiful boys, but one in particular has Down syndrome. And so I would love for you to start our conversation today telling us a little bit more about your journey and Caleb specifically.
Yeah, thank you so much. So 5 years ago, now almost 6 in January, I was a fresh 22-year-old mama. So excited to be bringing a little boy into the world. And at 13 weeks, I got the call that said Caleb would be born with Down syndrome. He had a prenatal diagnosis, and from there, it was a really rocky pregnancy, really rocky road. I lived in a very desolate type of place. My partner at the time and I were working in a place called Roswell, New Mexico, which literally is 3 hours away from any city, any major hospital with a NICU. And so we were having to travel back and forth to medical appointments and ended up throughout the pregnancy having to relocate to Albuquerque, which was 3 hours away from home or our support system or honestly anyone I knew, and ended up having to move there, live in the Ronald McDonald house until my baby was born. He ended up coming at 31 weeks due to IUGR and reverse diastolic flow. And during that time, it was the hardest time of my life. Every day was a fight for my son. And just for him to not only make it earthside, but also just for my mental health and myself, having not a lot of support back then, it was really hard for me to even ask for help or know how to ask for help, know what I needed when I was just drowning in diagnoses and the fact that my life was going to be different and something I never expected for myself.
So, Rachel, when you got the diagnosis at 13 weeks, do you remember what you felt? Do you remember the emotions that came about?
Yeah, so I was sitting in the ultrasound room actually when they saw the first marker. The nurse or the ultrasound tech who was doing it completely stopped in her tracks and like looked around the room and was like, "I'll be right back," and stepped out. And literally the first words that came into my mind, I believe it was God or the universe or whatever you believe, told me word for word, he said Down syndrome. And I had never known anyone with Down syndrome before this. I had never been really involved within the disability community in any way, but the words Down syndrome were so clear in my brain. The doctor comes in, and my partner at the time back then he looked at me and he's like, "No, it's your anxiety." And I was like, "No, I don't think so." Doctor comes in and the doctor is like, "Your baby has markers for Down syndrome. We need to do further testing." And I couldn't believe it. I was like, how is this happening to me? I have all of these things in life going for me, and this is going to be probably the end of all of my dreams. It felt like I was drowning just in a wilderness that I didn't know how I could ever get out of, essentially. I didn't know how I would find a path out. But gratefully, there wasn't a path that I needed out because it's been one of the greatest blessings of my life.
You said that you talked about how difficult it was when he was born at 31 weeks. Was the pregnancy was it different? Like, did you feel sick? And
Yes.
I'd imagine it is a different experience, and I've never experienced that. So what did it feel like? And did you kind of feel it before, or was it once you received that information?
Yeah, so I didn't know anything was different up until the first ultrasound. So like I had been pregnant previously and had a miscarriage. So this was like really my further along pregnancy that I had experienced. So I didn't know if it was like different or not different. After having Kason, I realized, okay, that was really different than what I had with my second. But I definitely like throughout the pregnancy, it was more so of fighting for the fact that the doctors didn't see worth in who he was. He had a lot of Caleb has heart issues. He was having like developmental issues as he was in utero, and so they didn't think he was going to make it. I was getting monitored 3 times a week, BPPs, ultrasounds. So I was always at the doctor, which was something also I had never experienced. I was a pretty healthy person up until that point, and had dealt with some little health issues, but nothing like taking me to the doctor 3 times, 4 times a week, counting kick counts nonstop. I mean, so many times. He did not have very active movement, and so I knew that that was like a bad sign, right? Like if your baby isn't moving, if it's not active, they tell you like, okay, you need to come in. Well, I was going in like constantly, and it was just a really hard time for me. It was a really dark period because all I wanted was for my baby to make it. I just wanted my baby to be here, even if he did have Down syndrome, medical complexities. I just wanted him to make it to where I could meet him.
Rachel, when did you tell people that he had these markers or that it would be likely that the baby would be born with Down syndrome? And how did people respond?
I waited till we had full confirmation. I waited until we had a positive diagnoses. After the initial ultrasound, the deeper ultrasound that they did, I did a CVS test, which is very similar to an amnio, but because I was so early on, they can actually go through the cervix versus going through your belly, which is safer for the baby. And so I was able to get that test done, and they were able to tell me probably around 15 weeks that he for sure had Down syndrome. And then following that, around my anatomy scan is when we announced it and we had told our families that there were markers, and everyone was very positive. There was fear, of course. There was no Down syndrome on either side of our families. And our families never, like my family has 5 kids and none of us have had medical issues or a disability. So it was one of those things where like everyone was kind of in shock, like, oh wow, like how could this happen? But one of the things that really surprised me was the way my family told me, like, Rachel, if there's anyone who could do this, it's you. If there's anyone who could take on this challenge. And now I look back and I see like, wow, I am so blessed to have had this experience because of the community I have now, the support I do have now that I wouldn't have, or the spaces that I get to serve and work in because of my son's disability, and what that's brought into my life.
So, but before you got to that acceptance and understanding it as a blessing, when people would say that, do you remember how you felt?
Yeah, I mean, I used to like, there was a lot because I am in the Christian space and there was a lot of like trying to pray away the Down syndrome, or like saying like after we had confirmation, like, no, we're gonna like pray for healing or pray this is gonna get better. And I'm like, no, there is it is positive, and like this is how he was created. There was a lot of frustration in that tension of knowing that like he was who he is supposed to be, grieving the fact that I wasn't gonna have the life that I expected for myself being so young, but also knowing that, okay, people are just ignorant. And like I was ignorant before the diagnoses and I had to do research to learn. So it's my job to educate the people who are making me feel this type of way.
But that's a really, really interesting point there. This like prayer for healing, this prayer for
Oh, and it's huge.
I think this is a really good learning opportunity. It's not that prayers aren't welcomed and that prayers can't be a sense of support. And the way you think about prayer as acceptance
Mm-hmm.
is, I feel like, a very important
Absolutely.
piece of advice for people. As maybe it's more specific to the Christian faith, but I mean, how would you recommend if someone's like, I want to pray over you? What should they be praying for?
I know for me, one thing, so praying for healing over health issues is one thing. Praying healing over chromosomal abnormality that is confirmed is totally different. So like, I really feel like if like your kid is sick, like Caleb, like had heart issues in utero, he had high drops, if you've heard of that,
Yeah.
fluid around the brain. And so like praying for those things, right? Like praying specifically for these health issues that can be cured, right? That can be cured, that can be healed. But things that can't be healed, God created them that way. And so you have to have that perspective of that God's good, even in this brokenness. Even though disability is a broken thing, there's still good that comes from it. So praying specifically over specifics, right? Things like high drops or heart issues, pulmonary hypertension, totally fine. Praying over like that the Down syndrome would disappear, that the autism would disappear, that cerebral palsy would be completely healed. That is just not realistic for here on earth. And I know for me personally, it hurts me when someone would want to change my kid's chromosomal makeup because that's how God created him to be here on earth.
Yeah. Wow, that's again, I think that's a really important point because people are so well-intentioned, excuse me, when it comes to wanting to do and say the wrong thing. And as you know, sometimes people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing, they say nothing at all. And in this case, a slight modification in how you're saying it can actually make a big difference in how that's received. So I appreciate you calling that out. So Caleb was born at 31 weeks. Tell me a little bit more about the NICU and really kind of what was going through your mind once he was actually earthside.
Yeah. So after Caleb was born was honestly a really traumatic season for me, and I'm open about it. When Caleb was in the NICU, and the days following that, I found out that my ex had been like having an affair and I walked through a really tough season then. So my son was born, I was in the NICU, and then I became a single mom all within, a couple months. And it was a really, really hard time. I remember sitting in the NICU after he was born by myself and looking at him and just thinking, God, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to see you in this? Because I feel so broken and I don't think I'm the mama for the job. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it out of here. And I don't even know if me or Caleb will make it through the night at this point because I am so depleted. And the months following, he was in for 12 weeks or 13 weeks, about 3 months. It was a dark time. I mean, the social worker would come talk to me because I would just sit there sobbing because I was like, I'm only 22. What did my life end up like? I've only been married for 2 years. How is all of these things crashing down on just little old me? It was hard, and I didn't know how to ask for support. I didn't know how to advocate yet. My parents lived hundreds of miles away in a different state, and now I was losing the family support of my ex's family, which is who we were surrounded by, who was our support system. And so it was really, really tough, and it was dark. And I honestly wouldn't have gotten through it without other disability moms that just rallied around me, that found me online, that connected with me through like Facebook groups, like the DSDN, which is the Down Syndrome Diagnosis Network. I have a really great friend, Beth. Her name is Beth Curvey, and she came to the hospital a few weeks after Caleb was born, and he was just really struggling, and I didn't know how to advocate for him. And I was in every face group possible being like, hey, this is what's going on at the hospital. I know it's not right, but what can I do about it? How do I fire a nurse? How do I do these things? And this mama that 15 years older than me came up, wrapped me up in her love. She had just had a baby with Down syndrome a year and a half prior, same hospital. And she knew the ropes and she taught me, girl.
Wow.
Like she came in and she's like, no, you fire that nurse. You go get the charge nurse. You get the social worker. You tell them. And then she was also the first person to tell me your marriage is not going to make it and you need to figure stuff out. And
Wow.
so it was so powerful for me that I had someone who came in and kind of swooped me up and saved me as another disability mom. And so
if I'm hearing you correctly, which by the way, just the whole story gives me chills because, here you are grieving two things at the same time, both of which are alive, right? You're
yeah,
grieving the very real reality of Caleb being here, fighting for his life, knowing that Down syndrome is going to be a part of your life forever. And you're also grieving the relationship with a man that you thought you were going to be spending your life with. And
yeah.
that combination at the same time, yeah, that sounds like
It was just hell. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was like hell to say the least. I just literally felt like I was living in a the Earth version of it. And like it was just so dark.
yeah, like you can't even describe it to people because it's so unfathomable that could coincide like at the same time. So,
Yeah,
what you're saying that did you immediately go on Facebook to seek out these people? Did you post on Instagram? Because like you really had to open yourself up. You had to be completely vulnerable about your situation. And, part of my goal in having conversations like this is, if you're so stuck, like, where should you turn? And it sounds like you were turning to people that could at least relate to one of the things going on into your life. So what was your approach? What was your process to, like, finding these individuals, finding these families?
Yeah. I knew, and just from like during this season, I had like full reliance on God. Like I was mad at him that he gave me the life that he handed me, but I had nothing else but to rely on him. And so I truly, truly believe that the women who walked before me were the ones I needed to connect with. And I felt like God like directed me in that path. Go on Facebook, get into every Down syndrome group possible, find people, like look up Down syndrome in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And that's actually how I connected with Beth, was because I was like, okay, she's a mom. She's been in this hospital and she was only here a year and a half ago. So she knows. And so when I connected with her, it was that immediate connection of like, girl, I got you. I'm going to show up for you. And I see that you're broken because I've been there, but I've walked before you and I'm going to carry you through this.
Wow, that's
And
so
that's why
amazing.
support is everything. And I truly believe, I write about this a lot and we talk about it a lot within our ministry, but disability parents that support each other, like you don't know you need it until you have it. You don't know how isolated and alone you are with very limited support until you connect with someone else who fully understands the depths of the sorrow and grief that you've walked through.
Yeah, and I know you talk about this a lot, and I think it's important about how this life that you're living is filled with these themes of opposites, that I know a lot of people that may not have a medically fragile child or a kid specifically with Down syndrome, they might not be able to comprehend that to the extent in which you feel that. And I do think it's hard for people to seek out help. It's hard to be completely honest with people, even if you have a completely healthy child. There's a lot of pressure out there on moms to just present as if everything is fine and that we're fine and we're good and everything couldn't be better. And the reality is there's a lot of silent suffering that happens with moms in general, but it's certainly highlighted in a situation like this. And so I think what I'm hearing from this is you have to find your people, because if you try to navigate this on your own, it's a dangerous path that you're going to be charting, because you're not meant to do this alone in general, but especially when you have the challenges that you were presented with.
Yeah, and I mean, I know even people that don't have kids with disabilities, like they go through divorce right after they have a new baby. And like they go through the depths of that sorrow, and they need to find people who have walked the path before them, who can show them that they're not alone in this journey, but there is light on the other side, that they can keep walking through the desert even if there is no path.
Yeah, and I think the stat is like 80% of parents who have a child with a disability and have been divorced. It's a very real challenge. It's not I think sometimes we in our culture we tend to kind of we try to soften things. Oh, this is going to be a more difficult season, or we're going to have new different challenges, and all of that is true. And there's a very real friction and exhaustion that sets in when you're having to navigate this seemingly with no preparation.
Absolutely. And there's nothing that can prepare you for disability parenting. Nothing. There's no path. Even if you are a sibling of a child with a disability, you aren't fully prepared to be a parent of a child with a disability. It's a totally different ballgame of knowing that your kid is not going to walk the path that you planned for them. It's their own path, and it's an unexpected one. And there's allowed to be brokenness in that. There's allowed to be grief and heartbreak and the feelings that are so dark that you don't even want to talk about them, but they're real. And then there's that opposite side of it, that you can still find joy in it. You can still find God's goodness in the way that, like, I find so much goodness in the morning when I get Caleb out of his safety bed. It's like his big fort, we call it. But we zip him out, and I see his almond, I see his almond shaped eyes, and he reaches for me and just gives me the biggest kiss on the lips every single morning. And I'm like, wow, God, like, what other 5-year-old boy would do this to his mama? every single day and just wait for that kiss. And I'm just so blessed to have that. And I have to see both. I think everyone that walks this just a path of brokenness or a path of grief, you have to be able to have the perspective and see both, because if not, you'll be lost in that grief forever. You'll be stuck there. But when you can see the bright side of things in the grief, when you can let them coexist, there is so much beauty to be made and beautiful things just produce.
So, common assumption, tell me if this is right or wrong. It's harder at the beginning to accept the reality, and therefore, I think it creates a lot of maybe tension, animosity between a parent and their child for them not being the way you thought they should be or want them to be. But it seems like for you, you really have got into this season of acceptance. Do those moments of disappointment ever still creep in?
Oh, yeah, and it still coexists. So I don't think I'm even at a place of full acceptance. I think that acceptance is going to be a lifelong process for me. Every year, there's new things that come up. Just even this past weekend, we were in a Christmas show called Christmas This Year here in Colorado Springs. It's a show that highlights families with Down syndrome and their siblings and their families. And Caleb just got so overstimulated after the first two shows that we couldn't finish. We couldn't finish the rest of the shows. He was just so behaviorally like in the depths of his own just overstimulation, where he wouldn't stop crying, screaming, like just could not calm down. He could not regulate. And even just this past weekend, I was like, God, like, am I just not a good mom? Like, did I do something wrong to have, like, did I push him too hard? And there's just new things that constantly come up in this journey that I still feel in denial about, right? Like, there's always going to be things that happen that make me think, like, wow, like, this is just harder than I could have ever imagined. And I don't know how I'm going to get through it. But every single time, God meets me there. I am able to see that even in my brokenness, that tomorrow there's going to be new mercies and new grace for me, and that I'm going to be able to keep going even if yesterday was so hard and I was in the depths of hell.
Tell me, I'm sure everyone's curious, how did you meet Kyle and when did he enter your life?
Yeah, so, Kyle is the best, and I just love him so much. We met on Hinge, about a year after I got divorced, and Hinge is a dating app. If you guys don't know, it's like Tinder and Bumble mixed. But it's classy. It's a classy dating app, everyone. Just wanna let you know. So, I actually was hanging out with my best friend, Savannah, who's also was a single mom at the time, and she was really pushing me to get back out there. She was like, "You're too young to just say you're gonna be a single mom and be a girl boss forever." And I was like, "No, girl, I don't wanna deal with these men out here. After this, I'm done." But God had different plans for me, and so she made me pay for Hinge for 1 day, and it's a free app, but, like, I guess the hot guys come to the top when you pay for, like, 1 day. And so, I had paid, like, the 90.
Great tips for Hinge users out there.
Yes,
I love
yes.
it.
If you are a single disability parent, please go on Hinge, 99 cents, okay? And,
Amazing.
Kyle had been with his friends, and they had set up the profile that day. He had, like, professional pictures. I'm a brand strategist and marketing professional by trade, so that was the immediate attraction for me, and then the only thing it said was, like, that he loved God and that he was, like, 27 or something when we met. And so we matched, and I messaged him, and I was like, "Hey, I think you're really cute. I would love to FaceTime or chat, but I have a child with Down syndrome, so you have to be okay with that because we're a package pair, and I don't even wanna talk to you if you're not open to it." And he actually replied, "I effing love Down syndrome." And then so that night we FaceTimed. Come to find out 2 days later that he had actually Googled Down syndrome right after I told him to figure out what it was. But, um,
Amazing.
the it worked out. We ended up, getting married actually, like, after 60 days after we met. It was wild. We just, like, knew, and yeah, the Lord has just blessed us and our marriage. And then Kyle has just totally taken on the role of being Caleb's dad and loving him, and just showing up for him in the way that he would if Caleb was his own. And no one really ever knows that Caleb isn't Kyle's because of their connection. Like, Caleb has so many of Kyle's mannerisms now, especially since he's raised him since he was 1. So
Yeah.
it's definitely been the biggest blessing, and he's just the coolest. And I'm so grateful that my brokenness didn't end as a single mom girl boss, and it kept going into creating this life that we have now here in Colorado and doing family ministry.
I love it. I love it. And
Yeah.
what a wonderful testament to just putting yourself out there and not being afraid of who you are and what your circumstances were and are, and just saying, this is who I am. And it is a step towards acceptance of, if I'm going to be in a relationship, I need someone to honor and appreciate all parts of me and my family.
Yeah.
And you were able to then have a healthy, happy little boy, correct?
Yeah. Yes. And Kason, we brought Kason in the world in 2023 in January. An amazing, healthy home birth. And it was the most redeeming experience of my life. And I can't wait to do it again. I can, because like 2 toddlers at once is kind of hard. But, I'll wait like 3-4 years and then try again. But
Amazing.
yeah, it's been so good. And we are just so grateful for Caleb's and Kason's relationship too, and the way Kason just loves his brother, and the way Caleb constantly is growing because of his brother as well.
So you talked a little bit about the ministry that you and Kyle have together, and when you touched on it a little bit earlier about you've learned along the way around the value and the power of support, and I think you display that in so many different ways, and you really are a community builder, and it's all of these things that, again, have been presented to you. It seems like you've created an opportunity to bless others, and so I'd love for you to share a little bit more about what y'all are doing, so that others that might want to be involved can find out how.
Yeah, so A Little Extra Love is the name of our ministry. We serve disability families through empowering them through faith-based resources, support, and community groups. And then we also have a program called Inclusive Pathways that installs disability ministries into churches all across the country, in a way that makes the church inclusive, in a way that it's not happening now, in a way that's not segregated, but in a way where every single kid is feeling welcomed and accepted in the congregation that they're attending. It really is a culture thing when it comes to churches and places of worship. We can either choose to be accessible and choose to be the upside down kingdom of God and be welcoming to every single person who walks through our door, or we can choose to be a place that feels like a rock band and gives you the prim and proper people that the church or the Western church says you have to be in. We believe that that is not the truth. God created all of us, and we should be welcome wherever you feel led to be welcome to, especially when it comes to a spiritual congregation. We all know that our health isn't just our physical health, but spiritual, mental, physical, all of the things. And so we really try to partner with churches to make it a safe place for families like ours.
I love it. I think it's so beautiful. So if those that are interested in getting their church involved, what's the best way for them to follow up with you, Rachel?
So you can go to alittle-extra-love.com/inclusive pathways. And if you want to get plugged into our Colorado grow groups and Bible studies, you can go to just alittle-extra-love.com/link in bio. You'll see all of those there. And then also, if you would like to get plugged into an online Bible study, you go to alittle-extra-love.com/link in bio. And we'd love to meet you and serve you as well.
I think it's so wonderful. And Rachel, where can people find you on Instagram?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram at Rachel Vermeulen, TikTok, A Little Extra Love, and on Facebook, Rachel Verm.
Rachel, I've said this to you so many times, but you embody so many of the values of the company that we strive to build here at Support Now. You really, truly understand the value of community, of support in all chapters of someone's life. So first of all, thank you for coming on today. If someone that's listening finds themselves in a similar situation as Rachel, perhaps you have a Down syndrome diagnosis, or you've just given birth to a child that is medically fragile, this is why we built Support Now. We built Support Now because We don't want families to feel alone, and we want to bring structure to the overwhelm that happens in communities that want to show up for wonderful families like Rachel, whether that's money, meals, volunteering, or simply just updates. And so I encourage those that are curious or perhaps supporting someone that's going through or walking through a season like this to take a look at what we've provided. And Rachel, I know you have an experience using Support Now as well, which helps.
Yeah, so Support Now is our chosen method in our ministry and for family support services when we connect with churches. So we use Support Now to help families who I'm going to use a specific, our friends, Lauren Logan's daughter recently had a really tough, critical experience a few weeks ago. And it was one of the first ones that was really scary for them, really hit them in a way that they didn't know if their daughter was going to make it. We were able to, our ministry, there are huge parts of it. They are involved within different groups within it. And so we were able to launch a campaign for them. And within 4 hours, we raised over $4,000 through Support Now. And we could not be more grateful for the solution that we have of being able to not only put prayer, like create a whole prayer wall on Support Now with everyone, but also raise finances for them, send gift cards, and then also meals and picking up needs like taking the dogs out. It really is just the best platform that you and Scott have created. And we could not be more grateful to have such a great software to use within our ministry that not only helps us keep not be running with our chicken, like chickens with their head cut off, right? Like when you're managing 40 different platforms for one person, it is way too hard. So Support Now really dials that down and just has helped us streamline everything and streamline the support that these families really, really need.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And again, I love a good husband-wife duo when it comes to supporting others. So again, just super mission aligned. And Rachel,
Yeah.
again, thank you for your openness. Thank you for sharing more of your story. I am very confident that there are many, many others that will listen to this that will find a level of being uplifted through your story. And I know, no one knows how life will play out, but certainly with the mindset and with your just devout nature, you are bound for really, truly greatness. And how lucky your little boys are to have you as their leader. I truly draw a lot of inspiration just from your attitude, your mindset, and what you've built. So thank you. And for those, again, last little mention for Rachel, check out a littleextralove.com. Thank you, Rachel. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Jordan. Have a great one.